I said, you don't have a money problem, you have a priority problem. So we have to look at our debts and non-negotiables within this moment. So you can only make money in two ways: earn more income or reduce your expenses. So if you can't reduce your expenses, you got to earn more income. But if you can reduce your expenses, once you have a gap, we don't go buy more shit. We don't get a new car. We don't get new things. You take that and you learn how to invest. Please know this: everything's a wave of energy. Markets never continue to go up. Relationships are never perfect, and business is not perfect. Everything follows a wave of energy.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, where I bring the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and entrepreneurship to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today on the podcast is John Vasquez, a.k.a. Coach JV. We'll call him that for the show. And in 2006, he woke up from an attempted suicide attempt to a book called The Secret. And from that day forth, for the next 17 years, his life would never be the same. And after his attempted suicide, JV pursued a bachelor's degree and graduated from CBA Executive Banking School and scaled himself to a VP at a large bank. I wonder if they made him trim his beard for that one, but we'll get to that in a minute. And after years of dedication to the corporation, the man, he went through a great spiritual awakening and started to see the system for what it was, which I really want to talk about because I think we need to certainly have that conversation. He decided to leave that high-paid job and partner up with his buddy Caesar, created $1 Million Freedom Company, 3T Warrior Academy, and we're going to get into that and a lot more. He's got 7 companies, author of a couple of books, a podcast, social media influencer with 2 million combined subscribers, and a lot to get into. And his number one mission in life is creating a positive impact on someone's life every day. Let's see if he'll do that for me, and I'll do it for you. Let's get to it. Coach JV, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you, Adam. So excited to be here, man. Thank you.
Let's get to it. And I was telling you before the show, first of all, before I book it, here's a little inside baseball for anyone out there. Before I book anybody on the podcast, I'm looking at their previous appearances. I'm digging into their profile. And if I'm not interested in them, it's not going to be an interesting podcast. Mm-hmm. It's a simple little trick for any podcaster out there. If you want to have a good show, do your research and let's get into it. So this guy has opened up his mouth yet, and he looks interesting. And he's wearing a tank top because he's in Arizona and it's probably hot there. Coach, let's take it back for a minute here. And I don't know if you've discussed this in other shows, but I like to get to the origin story, right? The origin story. And if you don't mind me asking, what did your parents parent, how you grew up? What did your parents do for a living?
Yeah, great. Nobody's ever asked me that question, man. So yeah, my father, he served in Vietnam. He got our family out of the fields. He was the first generation over from Mexico. They worked in the fields, got out of the fields, went to Vietnam, worked in the mines, and then became a police officer for 35 years. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and then she eventually started working for the airlines. And so my mom was a stewardess and my dad was a police officer, man. So that's how the journey started.
It's fascinating. In this country, man, this country is built on immigrants, right? My wife is first generation. She came here from Minsk, Belarus, and saw her dad come over here as a plumber and worked his way up to be a successful property owner and contractor and builder. And it's that immigrant mentality, that hardworking. What was one of those first lessons that you can remember early on as a childhood from watching your parents, that work ethic? What did you learn from them?
Yeah, that's what I learned from my father. Work ethic, discipline. It's stayed with me. That's probably one of the biggest things. We didn't have the greatest relationship growing up. He was an undercover cop, so he's gone most of the time. And so
interesting.
we never fostered that deep of a relationship. And so my mom pretty much raised us when we were kids, and that he provided, did everything he needed to do. But what I did see is how, number one, is how to treat a woman. They've been together for over 50 years. And number two is the power of discipline and consistency. My dad always, no matter what, he always made it work out for us. And so I learned a lot about him, about discipline and hard work.
Let's unpack both of those for a minute there. And I'm lucky enough to, my parents have been together for, approaching 50 years. Wow. Which is crazy because I just turned 45. They were for 2 years. Yeah, we're getting up there. Did you see something now you apply to your relationships, like your relationship? Did you see, what did your dad do to keep that flame alive?
I don't know if he kept a lot alive. Well, he's the old school guy. Yeah, we'll get into the nitty gritty, man. My dad he's old school. He's a dude that they had the old school type relationship, right? I didn't see a lot. There was a lot of things that I saw that I do the opposite that I'm grateful for. My relationships with my kids is completely opposite. I didn't do too good at relationships, divorced twice, and now I'm in a very good partnership now. And so I'm starting to figure it out about 48 years old.
Listen, everyone's on their own journey, man. Let's
Yeah,
keep it real.
yeah, third time's a charm. But what I did learn from my father is to not give up. I think that's one thing that I definitely learned from him in regards to staying focused on what matters. And so me and my father didn't have the greatest relationship. He didn't teach me a lot as a kid, and so there was a lot of separation there. But I am very grateful for the things I learned from him, and I find a lot of gratitude for the relationship that we did have, because I have the opposite with my kids. And I have no qualms against my father, but I wanted to be everything my father was not to me.
Well,
And because of him, I honor him for that, because I have such a phenomenal relationship with my kids now. And so
and that could go either way. So kudos to you for taking that, right? There's a lot of folks out there where that's all they know, and that's the way they're going to treat their children, versus folks like yourself who said, you know what? I had that. I don't want that. I want the opposite. And I think I don't know if I take it for granted or not. Like my dad, both my parents are New York City Board of Ed teachers, very nurturing. And that's the way I grew up, very hands-on learning. And that's why I do it with my kids. So it's crazy to think of me any other way to do that. And to think if it was the opposite, would I have the same approach as you did? So let's fast forward your story for a little bit. And I'd love for you to take us through to that point. As I like to say, Coach, I truly believe that the treasures are in the shit pit.
yeah,
The treasure to went to someone's life when they have those moments when they find is when they're at their bottom. And when they're at their bottom, it's rock bottom. And there's no greater foundation to build upon than rock bottom. Take us back to that point in your life. And I'd love if you could give us some kind of age, kind of time marks there to give everyone some reference.
Yeah, I'll give some context of how I got to
Please.
talk about to all the way up to suicide. Some context, like as a little boy, I want to make this very clear before I continue. I blame nobody for this. It was all my own internal dialogue that created the reality that I was living. Back then, I thought it was an external force causing this, but there was stuff that happened to me as a child that I had to internalize that shouldn't happen to a child. So it happened to me from kindergarten all the way to sixth grade. So really messed up my subconscious mind programming as a child. And my young adult life, I was looking for edification in the wrong places from the world, and I just couldn't get that. So my father, again, he did everything he could. He provided for us. He was working nights. I wanted that edification from my father, right? And so I'm not blaming him, but that's what I wanted. I wanted edification. I wanted a role model. And what I found is I started looking for edification in all the wrong places. So in the military, got out of the military, and I pursued a bodybuilding acting career. That didn't work out. I'm not a bodybuilder or an actor. And so
Give it a shot though.
I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I was doing it because I wanted to be seen. Because as a young child, I never felt seen. And the broken little boy just wanted to be seen, wanted to be heard. I wasn't a good athlete. And so maybe people listening have been through that, where you just want to be seen. You see the star athletes and the guys getting the girls. And so
You want that attention.
yeah, I picked the wrong vehicle, man. I picked bodybuilding, which is a very self-centered, very self-absorbed. It's all about attention. And it became a slippery slope for me. So it started out as a healthy way to live my life, going from chubby kid to bodybuilder. But I had a leg injury. And the doctor prescribed me opiates. And so the first time I'd ever taken an opiate in my life, and I'll never forget the underpass I was driving under, the feeling hit me. It was like this euphoric, like it just rushed through every time I talk about it, I get chills in my body. And I was like, oh my God, it felt good to me, and being transparent. And so I started to be more open, and I was talking to people. I'm like, what is going on here? So the next day I took it again, not even for the injury, but for the feeling. And then next thing you know, went from 1 pill to 2 pills to 3 pills. And I was a clean cut guy to full blown opiate addict by 2000, rolling into 2006.
Straight heroin. It's synthetic heroin. That's what it is. And it's an epidemic in this country. And I don't know anybody who's, me personally, deeply personally, who's not been affected by this.
Oh, it's brutal. It's such a dark energy to it as well. It's like it went from 1 pill to 2 pills to 3 pills. And so I found that as an outlet. It was like it was giving me this feeling, this vibration. What went in the beginning, it was a functional addict first couple of years. Going into 2006, everything just spiraled. It went from it wasn't working anymore, trying to get 20 to 30 pills a day. I started injecting this injectable painkiller called Nubane. Some bodybuilder introduced me to it, and it was game over from there. I started main veining it, and then I became a full-blown addict in 2006. And at this time, my daughter she was just turning 3 years old, and it was brutal, man. I'm trying to balance running a business. I'm a full-blown addict. It's July 2006, I had about $65,000 in my bank account. By December 18th, 2006, the day I attempted suicide, my bank account was negative. I had spent every dime of everybody's money, everything in our business on drugs. And that was the day I decided to take my life. The most selfish thing I could have done, having a little girl. But in that moment, just being transparent and honest, I couldn't see the way out. Number one, I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the right people around me. I didn't have the right mentorship. And I just couldn't see my life getting any better. And so on December 18, 2006, I took a massive amount of opiates. And I remember I even set up my office with me and my mom are very close. And I just imagined my mom walking in and finding me. And I blew up a mattress in the office and I injected it into my veins. And I loaded up a bunch of syringes, did as many as I could. I remember throwing it away from me. So I knew I was going to pass out. And I passed out and I didn't know it was 48 hours later, but all of a sudden, you remember the Razor flip phones has a little screen in the thing. Yeah. I hear that distinctive ring and I'm like, and this is crazy how thoughts become things. The first thought I had was,
I thought you were dead.
I thought I was dead. Yeah. So
the right. First
my first thought was you can't even kill yourself correctly. That's how negative my state of mind was.
Oh man.
So I stumble over, I look at the phone, it says mom in that little screen. And I pick it up, and my mom and our relationship had been pretty tumultuous because of my addiction. And I think they knew I had an addiction, but it was like the family wasn't admitting it. And so She said, I don't know what the F is going on with you, but you need to read a book called The Secret. And she didn't know that she'd woke me up from attempted suicide. I didn't say anything, went and got the book, and the rest is history, man. My whole life changed. Yeah.
So you look back on it now. It's crazy to think about this. Was it a higher being calling you or just not your time?
I do.
Or did you just not do a good enough job? I hate to say that. But
that's a fair question, man. And there's something that I talk about without trying not to get emotional, but like I had never had any access to spirituality, Jesus, God. I knew that I was baptized Catholic. I went to church at funerals and weddings, and I knew that my grandma would pinch me in church just if I did something wrong. I never had any. I didn't know who Jesus was. We never talked about God. I knew Christmas was Santa Claus and Easter was the Easter Bunny. And the ironic thing was I prayed right before I attempted suicide. I said, "Dear Father God," went through this whole prayer, and I'm like, and then I woke up with this book, The Secret. And so that was the first time I'd ever prayed. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know who I was praying to. And I woke up to that call from my mom, which I feel was divine direction. I feel truly,
had to be.
It's been divine direction since that moment. Like my whole life has been divinely through spirit. Yeah.
And now does that moment just reinforces everything that there's a higher spirit. And I say it all the time, like faith isn't equated to religion, right? Faith is just belief in something higher. Something stronger and a calling. For those folks who are not out there, who have not read The Secret, I don't know if you want to give away The Secret, but give us a high level overview of the book.
Yeah, the ironic thing is it's really not a secret. It's everywhere.
You know it.
The book Think and Grow Rich, it's in the first word, think. They wrote that book back in 1939, which is basically The Secret. It's all talking about manifestation, thoughts. In the beginning was the word was with God, the word was good. It's the word, it's your word. So what you believe in your heart, you think in your mind will eventually become your words and become your reality. If you can see it in your mind, eventually you can hold it in your hands. What you repeatedly do gets ingrained in your subconscious mind. What gets ingrained in your subconscious mind becomes your unconscious activities. So I was able to look and say, wow, hold on. I put the little DVD-ROM in. I watched the DVD first, the movie, and I was like, I created all this. So my thoughts were, you're not good enough. Nobody loves you. You're never going to get the girls. My bodybuilding shows were never enough. And so of course I created that reality. Of course those things attracted into my environment. So I was like, I did it from a negative sense. What if I reverse engineer this? And I just started doing I am affirmations. And then as I started to deeper down the road, 6-7 years down the road, I hear that Moses goes up to the burning bush. And then Moses says, who do I say sent me? He says, the great I am. And from there on, God's name became the great I am. So whatever you put behind the words I am become your truth. And people can deny this, but I can't deny the fact that my life went from crackhead 17 years ago to doing I am affirmations to where I'm at today. That's undeniable.
No, it's absolutely incredible. And there really is something to be, people always ask, what keeps you motivated? How'd you do this? How'd you make that opportunity happen? You must be lucky. I was like, no, it's a combination of multiple things. It's hard work, preparation, opportunity, and the other piece I put in there is speaking it into words, manifesting.
Yes.
When I have an idea, for me, coach, it's very simple. My motto is make shit happen. Straight up. That's like how I manifest it. If I want to do something, how do I get to that end goal? How do I figure it out? Sometimes I'm successful. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I just make shit happen. And I'm also a deep believer in faith. Spirituality for me, Jewish by blood, but not, there's a lot of elements of the religion that I really love, and Judaism and Christianity are very similar, and Islam too. There's a lot of similarities from the story points there. But for me, it's about, when it comes to it, it's the family aspect of it. the family gatherings, the togetherness, the values that come along with that, and that part of the spirituality of it too. There's some elements if I agree with, some of them not, but for all intents and purposes, it's about having something to guide you, something to lean on from a faith perspective. You read The Secret, and what was the first big change that you decided to make in your life? How'd you clean up your act?
Yeah, the first thing I did is I don't recommend this to anybody, but I did self rehab. I blocked myself in my apartment for 2 weeks. It was a brutal
Just
process.
cold turkey.
Just cold turkey. I take that back. There was a gentleman that I had a bodybuilding company. One of my clients, her husband was a doctor. He gave me some Ultram, like we weaned off a little bit. I didn't go to rehab.
Right.
I decided just to go. Now, maybe I had an advantage. I was at rock bottom, had no money. I was just weeks away from getting evicted from my apartment. Everything was sold in my apartment. So I just laid in bed, got up, and I started doing I am affirmation. I would start by just closing my eyes and be like, I am powerful. I am strong. I am worthy. I'm abundant. And I would just repeat I am affirmations. And then eventually I started getting up after I throw up from rehabbing.
It's a detox. Yeah.
I look in the mirror in my eyes, like deep into my soul. And I'm like, I am powerful. I am strong. I am worthy. I'm abundant. And I remember I started to smile at myself. I'm like, this is silly, but I was smiling. I'm like, oh, this is neat. And then 2 weeks later, I remember I got up on the edge of my bed and I'm like, okay, I feel somewhat normal. Like I feel normal. I feel like I could actually get outside. So I remember walking, and my life from a very young age was, I felt like I had to grow up quick because of things that happened to me. So I didn't really get that childlike state of mind or that wonder. I felt like I was always in survival mode. And so when I went outside, I remember walking, it was funny, but I was like, oh, that's a pretty flower. And I'm like, did I just say that? And I was like noticing the flowers, and I was noticing like architecture, and I'm like, okay, there's something going on here. And so I decided just to surrender to what was going on. And I'm like, so then I would go sit on this little grassy hill called Val Vista Lakes, and there's these lake houses, and I would just sit there and I would literally close my eyes, and I would imagine. It was funny because that point I just had Raven, my daughter, and I would see two kids there, and I would see us barbecuing outside, and I'm like, I'm going to live in a house like this someday. I'm going to live in this type of environment. And I'd open up my eyes, and then all these opportunities started coming to me. Like I get a call and somebody tells me to interview for a job at a bank. And that's how the paradigm, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to trust whatever this is. I'm going to have faith. And in that time for me, I didn't know it was God. I didn't know it was Christ. I didn't know it was, like I say, religion means relationship. Right. I didn't know where this was taking me. All I knew that it was putting me into a positive state of mind. Love that. It was an interesting journey, man.
So you clean up your act. You're like, all right, I need a change of pace. What the hell drew you to going to school for banking?
Yeah.
Where did that revelation come from, Coach?
That had to have been divine direction. So first of all, let's start with the fact that I have severe dyslexia, so it makes no sense to go into banking. And so this is a funny story. So I had these odd end jobs. I was just I was in survival mode. I was happy I was alive. I was happy
just figuring it out.
I was with my daughter.
Day by day.
We had no money. This is an interesting story too. I want to share this real
Please.
quick about parents and presence. So before I had my drug addiction, we were going to Disneyland. We're doing all kinds of cool shit. And before I was in the full blown addiction, like 2006 was the disaster. But before that, I was a functional addict. We're doing all this cool shit. And I remember sitting in my apartment one day, and it's hard for me to talk about this. And my daughter was just a little girl, man. There was nothing left in my apartment. I had sold everything to try to keep paying the rent. The only thing that was left was a room was put together. We're sitting right next to each other, and I'm exhausted, man, because I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to keep roof over our head. This is after I rehabbed and stuff. And my little girl looks up at me, man, and she goes, Dad, I like you better now. And I was like, why would she say that, man? We're at the park every day. I had no money. We're at the park every day. We'd go to the dollar store. We'd get some food. I was with her every day because I was present. It didn't matter about the stuff. It's because I was with her.
That's all they want. They just want your time. They just want you.
That's it. And from that moment, something shifted in me, and I was like, wow, okay, so I'm just going to be present in this. And now of course, we all go in and out of presence running companies, but right. I get this phone call from a gentleman who mentored me through it mentally through the process. His name is Joe Italic. His name is Joe Italic. And he said to me, hey man, I think I got a job for you. I said, okay, cool. And I literally at this point would have been a janitor, man. I'm like, I need money.
Something, some kind of stable income.
He said, you're going to need a suit. And I said, okay. So I still have the suit up in my attic. I bought it for 50 cents at a thrift store, big oversized suit. And I show up to this interview. Lady's name was Lori Schmidt, man. So God bless her soul, man. I was sitting across from her. I'm doing all this manifestation vision boards and shit. And I'm like, okay, she's going to give me a job. She's going to give me a job. I'm playing this stuff. And I'm sitting there, and I just was my authentic self. And I said to her, I remember saying at the end of the interview, I said, if you give me this job, I will be the best employee you ever hired. So I walk out, and I get a phone call 15 minutes later from her. And I'm like, it's going to work out. And she's like, hey, we want to hire you. I'm like, yes. And I'm thinking like janitor or something like that. She's like, we want to hire you as a banker. And I'm like, what? A banker? she goes,
With money?
yeah, the most important thing she said though, I said, thank you so much. I said, why did you decide to hire me without the quality? She goes, we can give you training. She goes, but this is key. We liked your energy.
Hmm.
I was like, hmm. And that started to happen to me in every single interview. So I moved up really fast in the company. Every person who interviewed me would be like, we loved your energy. There's people with higher education, things like that, but something about your energy. And I was like, okay,
What you
there's
bringing?
something to this quantum field, like where I'm bringing this great
Did
attitude. Go ahead.
Did you have the same energy before the addiction and the suicide attempt?
No, the opposite. The
Your
opposite. It
energy
was like,
suck.
so yeah, I was energy drain. I was the
Yeah.
guy that like I was that guy. I was like everything was glass half empty, nothing ever worked out, everything happened to me. My tire was always flat. It was just I was that guy, and then all of a sudden everything I had all this good luck. This is the same dude in the same body. What happened? Right? The mindset shifted, the energy frequency changed, and I started to realize that every version of you exists. Like you said, if you can think of it, an idea, that means it can be created.
Right.
100%. You may not have the skills that you need within the current paradigm, but there's somebody around you or an opportunity that will come to you that will make that idea happen. And like you said too, nothing's failure. I wrote a book in 2012 that bombed, and it is the foundation of our $1 million ecosystem now.
Yeah, let's get into that for a second. So
Yeah,
we're going to compress and fast forward a little bit. So you worked
sure.
your way up the ladder in
Mhm.
the banking company, and you started to see shit. You started to wait a minute. I'm in the system here. I
Yeah,
see what's happening. What was it that you saw that some people know about, but other people have no freaking clue about when it comes to
yeah.
the system?
Number one, the banking system, it's a fractional reserve system, right? Where you put your money in there, they lend your money right out. It's basically a Ponzi scheme, man. Number one, that's how the system, the American
And it's a
model,
house of cards.
complete
We
house.
saw that happen with the bubble burst, the mortgage crisis. Yep.
And right now, as we sit over the last 200 years, America's never been in a position like this. We have more debt than we have income. So we have banks are literally in a liquidity crisis. So as I'm sitting there, our bank was going through a big scandal too. And I got to see what people would do and cover up for money. And I was like, this doesn't feel right, man. This doesn't feel right. And so I was actually speaking up and doing what was right based on how my gut felt. So starting to, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And I started to end up in fake news. I was like, this is interesting. Okay, this is really interesting. I realized that the media is fake. I literally got a call one day and they're like, hey, listen, I was an executive, a VP at the bank and I run the retail area. And they said, hey, listen, you're about to hit the New York Times. And I'm like, because the bank was going through a scandal. And I was like, for what? And they're like, so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. This is the article. And I was like, that didn't happen. I was like, what are you talking about? And it clicked right when I was on the call. I'm like, because I'm speaking up. I get it. This is because like, I want to talk to New York Times. I said, that's not how it works. They're just going to post this. They said it's better off if you just don't rock the boat.
Keep your
Right
mouth
after they
shut.
said that, I was like, hell no.
I'm rocking the
Hell
shit
no.
out of that. I'm tossing that boat over.
And so, yeah, so I stuck it out from 2012, 13, 14. The bank was going through this huge scandal. And I realized I'm like, if it doesn't matter what I say and they can create a story that isn't true, then I may as well start writing my own story. So in 2017, I walked out with my big old ego and I thought that it was all going to work out. And so I launch a book, I launch a podcast, and I launch this huge program. And I think I'm going to go save the world. In January 2018, I launched my first program. And guess how many people signed up? Zero. I launch it again. Zero. And so
Why did you not have an audience? Did you not build any fan? Did you?
no,
Why you thought? Where was the fail point there? Looking back on
the
it,
fail point was I thought that if you had a good product, it would sell.
no.
I didn't realize that I didn't have an audience. Nobody knew who I was outside of banking. I had a huge ego. I thought I was much bigger than I really was, and I hadn't been battle tested. I had never been in true entrepreneurship yet. And so
You haven't worked for yourself yet. You haven't yet. You don't have the. You didn't have the receipts, as a kid to say, right?
yes, so I'm launching this program around mindset and stuff when I had the safe, secure job. And I had been through some stuff and I wrote a couple books, but I was like, so yeah, that's when the journey started. I walked out in 2017 and I did a video on my YouTube channel and I said, I want to be a warrior in a modern day society. I always tell, be careful what you ask for because God will give it to you. So at that point, I still had a huge 401k. I had a bunch of money in my bank account. So it was cool to fake the funk and act
Yeah,
like
you had a safety net.
Yep, everything because I was able to play this character and I'm kicking ass because I wanted everybody, my ego. And then around 2018, almost all the money was gone. I had spent trying to get this thing going. And then all of a sudden in 2018, I had this moment where I'm like, you know what? This is exhausting playing this character, man. I was like, I'm going full authentic. So I started actually doing stories of myself Ubering. I was like, I'm broke. I'm Ubering now. And so I started to tell the true authentic story, and I felt this huge relief off my back.
So let's pause there for a moment. This episode's about you, not about me, but I'm going to make one point here.
Please.
When I was working for companies for 15, 16 years and I got fired and I had my self-awareness epiphany, that's when everything changed. And when I say self-awareness epiphany, it was management of the ego. And there's elements of ego that are very important for your growth and your protection. And there's elements of your ego that are detrimental. But when you're able to discern which part of that ego is important and which part to check, that's the unlocking for me. So that was part one for me. And then part two for me was when I went down the path of entrepreneurship, similar to you, I didn't know at first. I'm like, this is scary. How do I go from a 9-to-5 paycheck, which you were getting at the bank like I was getting in corporate America, to I had to now kill what I eat. The only way I'm going to survive is if I go out there and kill. But once I started killing, man, and I got a taste for that, it unlocked something in my DNA that I knew I always had. And that was my drive. That was my passion. And that was also my authority and receipts to build upon what I'm doing now 10 years later and have that authority. So what was that first taste, that first real true entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
You had business beforehand, right? Before the bank, and you were doing some bodybuilding stuff, right? In that world, but not to the extent of
nothing like this, where all of a sudden we have a facility now, we got investors, all this stuff. And my true taste of entrepreneurship was understanding that, like you said, that's where the discipline came in, what I brought up with my father, because I knew if I just kept going, it would work out. I knew that. I just knew that. Within the current reality that I was facing, it didn't seem like it was. So I stayed really focused on the thoughts. The entrepreneurship was when I started to bring on team members. I was like, oh my God, it's not about me anymore. Now I have this team of people that are relying on me to feed their family. And that's where it really dug into me. I'm like, I can't give up. I can't give up. And thank God we didn't. In 2019, I went through Alex Hormozi's program. Actually, he's a great business coach, great entrepreneur. Went through his program early on before he completely exploded. And thank God I got to get in early. And I learned a lot of skills from him. Number one, I was running my business completely incorrectly. I was running in the business, not above the business, right? Number two is I was taking all the money and I was not investing in myself right outside of it. So I was just a house of cards. And then finally I started investing outside, which is into cryptocurrency, and which is I teach a lot about. And then the house of cards fell because COVID shut us down. And so now here I am. I finally get it going. We got this big 6-figure business running. And then 2019 or 2020, boom, they shut us down. And like just a crushing moment. I'm like, wait a minute. They can come in and take my ability to feed my family. And so in that moment, I was like, I will never put myself in a position where I cannot take care of my family. Nobody will ever put me in a position to not take care of my family.
Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love, and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
So pause on that for a second. First of all, what was the business? What type of business was it?
Yeah, it's still the same business. So it evolved from, it was JV Impacts, became 3T Fitness, now it's 3T Warrior Academy. So the facility I'm sitting in, we have our YouTube side, our conference center, which is like financial literacy, YouTube, education. On the other side is a gym. So we do high intensity training, meditation, stuff like that. So
interesting. And so it's member-based, subscription-based?
Correct. Yep. Member-based, subscription-based. Yeah, it started as just fitness and mindset. Now it's evolved into financial literacy, financial education, communities, retreats, things like that, and conferences.
Oh, I dig it, man. So let's talk about financial literacy right now. I think it's definitely an epidemic in this country too. I think by nature, you look at, 12, 18 months interest-free financing, like all these things where people think money is cheap, money is free, but it's not. It catches up to you. Believe me, I am a victim of debt, credit card debt, ebb and flow of credit card debt. And listen, just based on my opinion, some debt here and there is okay. And when I say debt, that could be a mortgage on a house, which is, in my opinion, good debt. What's crazy, the best investment that I have is my house. And when I refied it down to a 2.6, that's all. I'll take that all day long to the house. Yeah. But you still don't own your house. I don't own my house. On paper, I own my house. No, actually, not on paper. The bank owns my house. Let's be real about it.
Yep.
So I'm going on a rant here. Financial literacy.
Yeah.
Let's start here and bring it down to what's happening in reality and how people could get on track and get educated.
Yeah, unfortunately, in America, our economic system, especially since the 1900s, taught us how to memorize and not to create. Number one,
Hmm.
it didn't teach us how to be entrepreneurs. Our schooling system is set up just like a corporate system, right? They go to school, they get two 15-minute breaks, a lunch, and then they're fighting to get to the weekend, right? Kids are running out, the bell rings, just like work. They taught us to be corporate workers. The problem is that a lot of people don't understand what the dollar actually is. So especially since 1971, the dollar is just debt. There is no money in the American monetary system.
There's no
It's just
gold anymore, right? There's no gold in Fort Knox, is there? Right?
no. Yeah, in
Maybe.
1971. They told us they were protecting us from speculators. They just didn't have our gold to back our money, and so basically they switched to. And they also realized too, is that they literally had a spending limit if it's backed by gold. So by detaching from the gold standard, saying they're protecting us from speculators, they were able to turn the printing machine on full blast. Unfortunately, you and I, Adam, have caught that ball. And so now we're in a position where they printed more money than in history from specifically 2020 to 2022. But since Obama to 2012, they turned the printing machine on. We have 35 trillion in debt. We collect 4 million in taxes, and the interest on our debt is 5 million. We don't even collect enough taxes in America to pay the debt. So America is in this weird position right now where we have more debt than we have income.
Trillion. Yeah.
Yep. Most of our debt is held outside the United States by China and Japan. We don't collect enough taxes to pay the interest on the debt, and banks are in a liquidity crisis. The bond market's all messed up. So now the feds right now, and this is what I teach, is the macro. This is what I've been obsessed with, is macroeconomics and how money flows through the system. Remember this: the 1% will always remain the 1%. The money always flows to the same 1% every single time, because there's only debt. Right. And so you brought up a mortgage, right? And so I have a mortgage too. I think there's certain people, Grant Cardone says, oh, mortgages are crap. Blah. I like having a home. I like making a payment on a home. I feel like, because having a home for my kids, it feels like a huge investment for me.
It's also an equity too. You could borrow against it. It's an interesting investment vehicle. We'll pause on that for a second.
Yeah. If we go back to the 1950s up into the 2000s, 2000 up to 2006, it's a great. You got the American dream, man. But here's a great example too. My parents. Let's talk reality. My parents bought their house in 1973 for $25,000.
Okay, inflation. What is that now? Inflation, $25,000 now is what?
$400,000.
Okay,
that's how much their house costs. Do you think their income went up that much? No, not even remotely. So people's productivity has gone up. Our income has stayed flat, but the cost of goods have gone up. And so now we're in this tipping point in America. The average American needs to make $150,000 a year to be middle class. The system doesn't work anymore. So people have to start to rethink retirement. They really do, right? Going to school, getting a job, getting a 401k. There's only like 294,000 millionaire accounts in Fidelity. There's not a lot of millionaires within them. It seems like they're like, oh, there's more millionaires than there ever has been. It's because of the tech boom and the crypto boom and things like that. But if you look at the average American right now, they're looking at an economy that is getting replaced by AI technology, right? We're going into almost a Great Depression-like state. They say, our government officials right now say, oh, there's no recession. Well, go talk to the single mom trying to buy groceries. Go talk to the family with two kids that are going to buy some meat for their family, and it's $100 every time they go to the grocery store.
Unbelievable. Buy three things. Literally, I went yesterday to the supermarket. I bought bread, cereal, and a bag of chips, and I think it was like $28.
Yep.
What the fuck? Like,
it's crazy, man.
Actually, I got excited because the bread was on sale for $1.69 less than I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, I used to not give a shit about that, but then I changed my mindset. I'm like, all those little savings add up for other things.
Yeah. And right now, I live in Arizona specifically. I'll give you an example. The rent has gone from, like, some people's places, I've no reality, $1,600 to $2,700 since 2020. $1,000 more.
That's a huge percent increase.
12,000 in Arizona specifically. We need to make about $12,000 more a year to live the exact same lifestyle as 2020. Americans need to understand we're at a tipping point. Now, here's the good news and the silver lining, is that if you understand how money moves through the system, is deflationary assets are going to make people very wealthy. Cryptocurrency, silver, gold, real estate. We have November 7th and November 6th coming. November 5th, which is presidential election, 6th and 7th, which the FOMC is going to lower interest rates 50 basis points again. You're going to watch assets go through the roof. So this is the greatest time to build wealth in history as well.
All right, let's pause on two things here. My brother-in-law, God rest his soul, before he passed, we were having lots of conversations. I remember one of the last conversations, and he is in your camp. I'll put it that way. He follows your world. He's in your world. God bless him. And we remember having a conversation. We were outside of a family event. We're supposed to, dude, you just got to get silver. He's listened to me about silver. It's cheap. You could go buy bags of it. You could put it away. Silver's that good. Why silver, man?
Yeah, great
Or even
question.
gold? Silver better than gold?
No, great question. They have two different kind of. We'll do silver and gold, and then I'll talk about two different cryptocurrencies models.
Please.
Things. So silver, if you look at 19, this is a great question, man. You got some awesome questions. 1913, the Federal Reserve was created, and
That's because I'm interested.
yeah, it's so cool, man. 1913, the Federal Reserve was created, and their job is to balance out the job markets and control money supply. Since they were created on Jekyll Island, a group of bankers, everybody should read the book Creature of Jekyll Island. So the US dollars collapsed 98 to 99%. Okay. So silver, though, if you look at silver from 1913 to now, silver has held its value the whole time. As the dollars collapse, silver has held its value. So gold and silver usually generally hold their value. Now, JP Morgan's been sued for manipulating the price of gold, but generally gold and silver hold their value. Gold is like a store of value. It'd be like a bank, like a savings account. Silver is great for barterability. So a great example is Venezuela. If your dollar, the dollar's not going to, I'll give my 2 cents on the dollar. It's not in a good position, but it's definitely transitioning. But if you had silver in Venezuela, you could go to a grocery store and you can transact with silver. It's more barterability, like me and you could transact with each other. It's harder to take a bar of gold, and it's harder to transact.
I think that's what my brother was saying too, is God forbid the world goes to shit and we're in civil war here. You're going to be able to trade silver.
Yes, you can trade silver. You can go to a grocery store. They could clip it. They could weigh it. Gold is more of a store of value. And then we have
harder asset.
Yeah, harder asset. Great. And then you look at, so now you're seeing this big narrative around Bitcoin, right? That's why the asset managers are getting involved now. BlackRock created an ETF. So Bitcoin would be like gold, and something like XRP or XLM would be barterability, would be a transaction, XRP, XLM. So that's the way that I look at cryptocurrency. Is there's a new, money is just changing, right? We went from, like, people are like, oh, this is, no, money's just changing. That's what it is. It used to be, we used to barter, right? The barter system didn't work because if you shoot horses and I grew corn, but you don't need corn and I need my shoes, like, it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah,
So
I don't need it.
So they created like a coin system and then a backed system, and we've gone back and forth in between. So fiat means fake currency.
Where does one person like me get silver? If I was like, shit, I have $1,000 of cash, of liquid cash that I want to get some silver. Where do I get silver?
Yeah, you can go on the internet, but one of the companies I use called ITM. So I is in igloo, T is in Tom, M is in Mary. You can look them up on YouTube as well. Lynette Zhang's very sharp. You can buy it. That's a place that I trust, ITM. I have no affiliation with them, but there's a lot of places you might just be very careful.
Yeah, but how do you test if it's real? So, like, how does a layperson like me buy silver and know if it's real? Is there a way to test for silver?
Yeah, you could take it to a silver dealer and have them test it. You can do test kits, things like that.
Go to a jewelry. Some jewelers have it.
Yeah. Jewelers, things like that. Look for reputable companies that look for referrals, things like that. So that's why I use ITM. They're specifically in America. But yeah, holding silver is great. And people say, would you do, there's paper silver and paper gold as well. It's like buying a Bitcoin ETF or buying Bitcoin. I'd rather own the underlying asset versus the paper.
Yeah, I own your wallet, own your keys. Let's get into crypto for a little bit here. I've been bullish on crypto since 2016, and one of my biggest mistakes, not so much a mistake. I'm working in the digital marketing world. I have my ear to the ground, first mover advantage. Yeah. I'm hearing things out there, and Satoshi's white paper comes my way, and I read it, and I'm like, okay, in theory, I think this makes sense. Yeah. I understand the movement of decentralization. I see it from a micro and macro perspective, and I'm like, I want to get involved with this. I'm like, how do I do it? So I hear about this thing called Coinbase, and I go to open up an account, no problem at all, but I couldn't fund it back then. None of the banks, I wasn't able to move any of my money from my bank accounts to there. And coach, I got lazy, and what I had to do was take a money order. There was a few extra steps involved to make it happen. Yep. And if you look up the price in 2016 and where it was now, I'm shooting myself in the fucking face for that. Are you kidding me? Yeah. And I've told my wife this, stop telling me about this. Like, you could have gotten Amazon day one, right? Like, you can't think like that, though. You can't think what if, but you could think what now. Yeah. What could I do now? And thankfully, I've made those moves. I've course corrected. And generally speaking, and I stick to Bitcoin. I mess around with all the other ones too. Generally, I stick to Bitcoin. That's like kind of my place. I've done well on it. I put it away. I'm up about 63% on my portfolio, which you can't say to any other asset out there. But then I've heard, and people talk about that Bitcoin was a test project. Bitcoin was this whole thing. I know I went on a rant there, but I wanted to give you some background. When did you first get into crypto? Do you remember the first conversation that someone had with you? It's right. It's always like hey man, it's like they're trying to push this stuff on you, right? That's what it felt like to me a little bit. Like someone in a back alley over here. What are you trying to scam me on?
I love that you brought up 2000. So I'm going to rant a little bit. So you talked about
Go for it. Now it's your turn, man. You're the guest. Rant away.
2016, 2017. We'll put that in our back pocket to remember that year. So 2019, a guy named Jay Bills walked into our facility. He was a friend of mine. And he said, have you ever heard of this? Now, mind you, I came from banking. So Bitcoin, you're a fraudster, you're a criminal. You
trying to
not touch it, Jamie Dimon, right? So this guy walks into our facility and says, have you ever heard of XRP? And I'm like, no, Phoenix. I look it up, Phoenix Rising from the Ashes. I dive into it and I said, why the hell aren't banks using this? Now I went to CBA Executive Banking School and learned how to scale banks. I'm like, this solves the double spend problem. I'm like, why are they not using this? So then I started to research. Other countries are using it. SBI, Ripple's all over the place. And for some reason in America, it's just not catching adoption. Then I found this Ripple, this company was in Bank of America's patent. And then the rabbit hole started. I'm like, oh shit. So I devoted my life. That's what I've been doing since 2019. I've devoted my life to, we have a whole research team now. And so I started to invest in XRP first, and I was completely anti-Bitcoin, just to be transparent, up until last year. And then I started going all in. So
until last year.
Up until last year. And here's why. I'm going to share the narrative because I'm the micro and macroeconomic expert, right? So I understand how, and I get a lot of this from Ray Dalio, The Changing World Order.
I fucking love Ray Dalio.
Yeah. So we're in a radical historical transfer. Remember, first they resist it, then they sue it, then they regulate it, then they join it. Tim Draper. So when they're telling you to look this way, you should try to figure out why. So JP Morgan was buying Bitcoin back in 2017 when they were saying this. All the big asset managers were on the overseas markets, right? So in 2017, Jamie Dimon and Larry Fink said it's used for money laundering. It's a pet rock, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
2023. So I was accumulating all the altcoins, XRP, XLM, HBAR, all these other ones. And all of a sudden, BlackRock comes along. Now I've been studying BlackRock for a long time. That's how I make a lot of my economic moves. I was paying attention to their investments in MicroStrategies, which is the largest Bitcoin holder in the world. And all of a sudden they climbed up from 10 to 9 to the top 3 holders, Vanguard and BlackRock in MicroStrategies. I'm like, why are they getting so much exposure to this, to Michael Saylor's company when he's going all in on Bitcoin? That's a big risk. That's a huge risk, right? Then all of a sudden they announced their Bitcoin ETF that they're going to do one in 2023. I'm like, they lied to us. I'm like, so here's the crazy thing. So 2023, July, I started investing. Then we transitioned to 2024. And now the very thing that was created by a pseudonymous person in 2009, that's only going to be mined for under 116 years. 94% of the supply is gone.
Yeah, it's a finite resource. And that's a hard concept for people to understand. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now at the Bitcoin conference, you had President Trump, RFK, and Cynthia Loomis talking about a treasury bill. And it actually, the mathematics work. If they were to pull Bitcoin underneath the treasury and not sell it by 2045, it would shrink the balance sheet in half. So was Bitcoin actually created for decentralization or actually to fix the system that was broken? And that's why we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. You probably have your theory on it.
So knowing that, I'm like, okay, am I going to listen to Joe Schmo at the barbershop, or am I going to listen to BlackRock as they're moving their money through the system? And now they're the #1 Bitcoin holder through the ETF. They have top 3 holder in MicroStrategy with #1. So I'm going all in on Bitcoin now. And so I have this pretty cool strategy that I'm using. And I'm a big fan of XRP. I'm a big fan of payment tokens because I understand banking and I understand that these cloud technologies are going to fix a double spend problem, because then there's what's called a nostro vosto. So if I wire you money, Adam, it takes 3 days to get there.
What do you think's happening with that money in 3 days? Where do you think people are making money on the money? That's the whole. How do you think PayPal, the simple concept of PayPal, Venmo, Deal, any of these platforms, why do you think you have to pay if you want that money instantly from PayPal? Because you're taking away that money they're making. Most people let it sit for 3 days. They're like, I don't need it. Why am I going to pay $25? The company PayPal's making 18 times that.
What you just said is the most powerful. I hope people take what you just said as the lesson.
And once I figured that shit, I felt like the smartest man in the world.
Yes, because for example, banks, we have quite a few companies. I only use the banks for transact. Everything else is either moving into some sort of asset class. It's a store of value. I use insurance like Tier 1 capital, investing into, I'm always moving my money through the system, right? Always moving it. Anytime I get paid, I make sure I'm richest man in Babylon and make sure I'm multiplying my money. So what's really important, what you talked about, is the fractional reserve system. So you put 10,000 in a bank and Adam comes walking in, they're going to lend 9,000 of my money to Adam. Then Adam's friend comes walking in to get a loan for his car. They give 8,000 to him. They can do this 9 times and no new money's been created. Zero new money. And that's the position we're in. So now the dangerous position we're
Over
in. We have
leverage. Yep.
Yeah, we have more debt than we have income. The bond market inverted and it reinverted, singling a recession. But if people don't have jobs, they can't service their debt. And there's only debt in the system. So America's like in this, but everybody's worried about P. Diddy and all this stuff over here when everything's switching over here, man.
It is a scary place here. Wow, we went off on a little bit of a rant here. I definitely want to get your point of view on generational wealth. It's for the common person, not for the old money, new money, tech money, bro money, like none of that. What is the clearest strategy for someone to start building generational wealth for their family? If you're middle class, say you have a combined income of $200,000 a year family, which isn't a lot, but it's a lot more than the national average. How do you move in that direction to start creating generational wealth?
Yeah, I'll just speak from my own paradigm of
Please.
what I did. So I lost everything in 2020, held my crypto. I'm like, okay, wait, there has to be a different strategy. I got out of a vertical strategy. First of all, financial literacy. Once you understand what money is and you understand how the system works, you want to get on the other side of that system, right? So that's what I did is I'm like, okay, so richest man in Babylon, when money comes to me, I need to make sure it's moving through the system through financial literacy. Next is discipline through debts and non-negotiables. So people need to take a hard look. I always tell people when I meet with them, when I'm doing helping financial strategies, I'm like, you don't have a money problem, you have a priority problem. So I'll give you an example. I was sitting with a gentleman that he needed to invest about $5,000 a month to get to the goals that he wanted. He was my age. And he's, I don't have that. I said, let's talk about your debts you had. He had a jacked up $100,000 truck, he had a boat, he had ATVs, he had all the things. And I said, how much are those payments?
Toys.
He has about $3,700 a month. I said, you don't have a money problem, you have a priority problem. So we have to look at our debts and non-negotiables within this moment. So you can only make money in 2 ways: earn more income or reduce your expenses. So if you can't reduce your expenses, you got to earn more income. But if you can reduce your expenses, once you have a gap, we don't go buy more shit. We don't get a new car. We don't get new things. You take that and you learn how to invest. When you go into the capital markets, everybody should read the book Intelligent Investor. It's what Warren Buffett read at 12 years old. He switched from investing in stocks to companies. And then please know this, everything's a wave of energy. Markets never continue to go up. Relationships are never perfect and business is not perfect. Everything follows a wave of energy. For example, crypto's in a huge speculative cycle. It's going to go shooting up and I pull profits on the way up. I bring it down the risk pyramid and I put it into things that have been here forever. I can control my businesses, so that's on me. Insurance has been around since the Roman days. I actually insure my money. I insure my family, my term insurance to make sure they're protected.
Whole in life is not a bad thing. It's helped and saved me and it protects them for the future and it's forced savings.
Yep. So I bank on myself. I use Infinity, IUL. We use whole life as well. And then from there as well, silver, precious metals. And I use the crypto market to get the boom and bust. So you get the large amount of wealth in a short amount of time. I hate to say that because it sounds like get rich quick. But if you have an exit plan, you bring it down and secure it. So you want it in things that have been here forever. Real estate, insurance, precious metals. Why do you think that assets go skyrocketing when they lower interest rates? Because everybody's trying to chase the markets and get rich quick. But it's like gambling. You can go to the lottery. You might as well go to the casino.
Yeah, put on black.
So the key is you can catch these boom and bust cycles, but you got to know how the system works. Wall Street wins 100% of the time. So if you
the house wins.
Yeah, if you can get out before Wall Street. So here's what I love. I'll give credit to Robert Kiyosaki. He said when he's in the grocery store line and he starts hearing people getting rich about real estate, he's like, I'm getting out. Yep. So if I'm at the barbershop or I'm at the gym and I hear people, oh, dude, I'm getting into Bitcoin when it's almost 200,000, I should have been selling.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. Like, how does one person figure out like, what's a good strategy for a sell point? And how do you figure out, we have about 10 minutes just to keep you a time check here. From what you bought at, where you're at now, what's a good strategy to say, I'm going to take some winnings here?
Yeah, great question. So the first rule of thumb is we always take out our initial investment. Once I put in 25K and I make 25K, boom, I pull my 25 out. Now I'm on house money, right? Pay my capital gains, short-term, long-term. Now I got 25K sitting there, right? So that 25K, you can use what's called Fibonacci. You'll have to do a little education on it, but Fibonacci sequence, look historical patterns, look future patterns through Fibonacci, and then you set price targets on the way up. We do what's called a ladder, right? So for example, I'll use XRP, $2.70. I'm exiting 10% of 50% of my portfolio, and I ladder out. The reason why I do that is because exchanges or a lot of Robin, they all of a sudden have technical issues when they're being
right. What does a run on it? They're like, oh, you can't take your money out.
Yeah, because you nailed it. It's a bank run. They're basically running the system. And then people get caught at the top and slide down. So you always want to pull profits. So first is get your initial investment out. Then your energy changes. It's like going to the casino If I threw down $1,000 and I win 2,000, I'm taking the 1,000 put in my pocket. And then as I'm winning on the roulette table, house money, I'm pulling profits. Then when I walk out of there after a few cocktails, a little tipsy, I'm like, oh shoot, I got 1,500 in my pocket. And now I'm having a good time because I didn't blow the whole thing. If you lose, walk out. That's what I always tell people. So if you lose,
That's how I play.
Get the hell out.
I was just saying that in Vegas last week. Whenever I get my initial money back, that goes right into the pocket, and then you're playing with house money, and then you're having fun.
You're having fun, and remember, energy. Your energy has a lot to do with it. When I run into people that are always like, oh, this happens to me, I'm like, don't even get into investing, man. Until you change your attitude, until you change your energy, right? You want to be very careful with how you think about things. So,
Coach, let's bring it home here. I love this when I read it. How do you ensure that your mission every day is creating a positive impact on someone's life? What's that check mark? If it's like coming, hey, listen, shit, it's 9:30 at night. I don't know if I am. That's a bad example there, but how do you ensure that you make a positive impact?
By living my true authentic self, man. I realized when I was looking for everybody, I found nobody. When I found myself, everybody found me. And so I feel that if I live my true authentic self by saying what I mean, not saying it mean, but being honest and authentic with people, that's how I truly make an impact on people. Instead of I'm just be me. And I feel that by being me, my true authentic self, that makes a larger impact on somebody than trying to be a people pleaser. So I know that sounds a little bit opposite of what people would say. It's if I'm my true authentic self, then I'm showing up as I should. And that should make an impact on the people around me versus being someone I'm not meant to be.
Amen to that. On the other side of that, what's keeping you up at night these days?
Man, oh gosh, great question. It's having the knowledge and information that I have and wishing that I could get it to every single person in humanity. That's why we put out like 60, we go across 60 pieces of content a day. That I just wish I wish people could just be like, okay, let me just listen to this guy for a second. And I have a real big heart and affinity for helping the middle class get out of this rut. And it breaks that's why I'm doing so many podcasts as much as I can, giving out tons of free information. I don't have the answer for people, but what I'm asking them is to ask themselves, why do you believe what you believe, and start questioning everything.
Let's start questioning things, people. Don't take the media at face value. So many people, is that what you think what's happening over there in the middle? Don't you see that? Are you getting lost in the social media narrative? Let me explain to you how an algorithm works. Yeah. Let me explain to you how AI is manipulating the media. We're not going to go down that path right now. That's a whole other separate podcast. But just question authority. Question what you think is real and open your freaking eyes, pay attention, and look for patterns. That's what I tell people. Just pay attention with it. Coach, this is my masterclass. I've accumulated it, built it, curated it. It's my gift to the world. This is my canvas. I invite great artists like yourself on here, and my canvas is your world, man, and that light shines back at me. So let me ask you this. What is that single greatest piece of advice that you've ever received that you take action on every day?
Nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to save you, man. It doesn't matter. It's going to have an effect on our reality, physical reality, but it doesn't matter who becomes president. They're not coming to save you, man. That's the biggest piece of advice I've gotten. And I wake up every day that nobody's coming to save me, that it's my thoughts, my actions, and most of all controlling my emotions that create my reality.
I dig that. I dig that big time. And last but not least, you've been to the very bottom. You've been at the very bottom, been to the top, and everywhere in between. Always climbing to be back at the top, richest man in Babylon. But success has a cost. Success has a price. But success also has a definition. And I think that's where we need to start. Coach JV, how do you define success?
Freedom. That's it. Freedom of choice, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom to be with my children, like freedom. It's being free. And that's what success is defined to me. And that it's not a monetary thing. It's freedom.
Amen to that, right? Like freedom of time. And I think that's one of the things that starts when you become an entrepreneur. So wait a minute. No one's telling me what to do, but I have to earn it.
Yes.
I have to earn that time. I have to earn that ability. And I think that's what the drive is. This has been a fantastic conversation. We could go on for hours here, but we can't. I want to thank Coach JV. I want everyone to check out 3twarrior.com. We're going to link it up in the show notes. Where else could folks find you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for that opportunity. Just in Google, just type in Coach JV, like junior varsity, JV, John Vasquez, and all my stuff will come up. We have it all tagged. So it'll just make it easy for everybody.
That's how you do it, folks. Everyone, this has been a great episode. If you want to learn more, you can check it out at thepodcast.com. You know where to find us on social media. If not, come on. This ain't your first rodeo. You know where we are. And at thepodcast.com, NHP Talent on Instagram. You could find out more. Remember, be good to yourself. be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.